Welcome back to Kevin Toll Reads. I hope you are doing well. I'm going to challenge myself once again to do this all in one take with little to no edits. This could be interesting. So we're going to kick it off and talk about book number 1 that I want to talk about, and that is by Mickey Spillane, My Gun is Quick. It is book number 2 in the Mike Hammer series. And so some fun facts about Mickey Spillane. Real name is Frank Morrison Spillane. Spillane often played Mike Hammer himself in the TV and film adaptations, which didn't know that. He once said, "I'm not an author, I'm a writer. I don't want to be remembered as an author." Spillane was a World War II veteran and later a Jehovah's Witness, a very kind of large contrast to his books that are typically violent in content. And so without further ado, let's dive right into My Gun is Quick. It was published in 1950. It's in the genre of mystery and crime. It's part of the Mike Hammer series. And there was a 1957 noir film based on this book as well. And so summary of this book is the beginning. You meet Mike Hammer. He's in a bar. He meets a redheaded prostitute that's in the bar. She's pretty much down on her luck. Hammer, in typical fashion, being a gentleman at times, gives her some money, tells her, hey, you've got potential, clean your life up, sends her on her way, atta girl, you got this. And yeah, the next thing he knows that she's part of a hit and run and she was killed. And yeah, Mike feels some obligation to investigate this, being a private eye. And so he gets involved in doing so because, he just saw this woman at the bar. So it definitely hit home for him. As he begins to investigate, he starts to suspect that her death is no random crime, no random chance, and it's a cover-up of sorts. His investigation takes him deep into a web of both vice and blackmail, along with corruption, betrayal, and not to mention a prostitution ring, because, yeah, those were more prevalent back then. At least they say so. I don't know if that's true. So let's talk a little bit about what I enjoyed. This was a very solid story. It was very entertaining, which I think is going to be pretty much the majority of the books in this series. Mike Hammer is a great character. I really enjoy him. I liked, what his character could be, and I'm kind of eager to read on to figure out, how his character arc evolves. This one, definitely, we got to see kind of a similar side that we saw in book 1 as well. He's a vengeful private eye. He's very tough. He isn't always like the toughest man in the room either, but at the he takes a punch. And, he has a very deep kind of sense of personal justice. And that is very evident in this book, in this entry in the series as well. Velda, I really like her, his loyal and beautiful secretary. She's definitely in love with him. It's not even hinted at. It's just pretty much, you just know. I liked the redheaded prostitute at the beginning, but, obviously she was very short-lived, and that's not a spoiler. And I liked his interaction with Pat Chambers. He's Hammer's friend, occasional adversary. He's part of the New York Police Department, and so they definitely, use each other in different regards, especially when they're kind of both going after the same thing, or indirectly both going after the same suspects or part of the same case. And so it makes for an interesting story. In terms of rating and overall, I give this a 4.1. It's solid. It was definitely a good entry, especially for a book number 2. I liked the writing once again. I think Spillane's writing is just that old, crisp, matter-of-fact writing that I just really kind of gravitate towards, especially as I read more of it, especially in contrast to some of the other more modern authors. I just think it's just far better because far better. It's far superior because I think it tells a story in a much more condensed fashion, and it's much more enjoyable. when we got to spend 100 pages talking about, something that goes from this to the, a foot in a matter of speaking, it's just it's hard to get into it. And I think Spillane, John D. McDonald, Ed McBain, Louis L'Amour, I can go on and on. They do such a great job of telling a story in such a condensed fashion. It's just hard not to like it. I suspect I'm going to have a lot of books in the probably in the 3.8 to 4.5 range in this series, because I think they're all going to be just enjoyable in that kind of, and I'm probably going to have a few where they're going to be duds, and I'm probably going to have a few that are going to be, 4.7, 4.8s, because I'm really going to enjoy them much more than just the average. And so, yeah, if you're a fan of hardboiled crime, mystery, kind of that crime pulpish noir, this is definitely up your alley. If you enjoy kind of fast-paced pulp stories, violence, this is definitely in your alley. If you, however, don't, gravitate towards stories that are more misogynistic, in language and gender roles, this book reflects heavily on kind of some outdated and aggressive portrayals of women. That might turn you off. Readers looking for more literary prose. Again, I'm not looking for that in this series, and that's definitely not what this series is about. But that's my take on My Gun is Quick by Mickey Spillane, book number 2 in the My Camera series. I give it a 4.1. And now let's jump over, and I read this one on my Kindle. It is The Mugger by Ed McBain. This is a book in the 87th Precinct series. Some fun facts about Ed McBain. His real name is Salvatore Lombino. He legally changed his name to Evan Hunter in 1952 and started using McBain for his crime fiction. He also wrote a screenplay for Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. I didn't know that. He published across multiple genres. He wrote literary fiction, science fiction, and was a screenwriter, but best known for his crime fiction, especially the 87th Precinct novels. Was one of the first mystery writers, however, to explore the cop team rather than the lone detective, which is kind of interesting when we're talking about Hammer and the 87th Precinct here. And so The Mugger is book number 2 in the 87th Precinct series. It was published in 1956. There was a film adaptation made in 1958 of this book as well. So let's talk about the summary of the plot. We're again in the fictional 87th Precinct. We're in Isola, which is kind of his fictional representation of New York City. There's a mysterious and polite criminal known as the Mugger who is terrorizing women, robbing them, mugging them, and then he bows theatrically and says, "Clifford thanks you, madam," and then he flees the scene. Meanwhile, his muggings get a little more physically abusive, and as women start to fight back a little bit, and the detectives at the 87th Precinct are investigating. Well, what kind of makes this interesting is you have that dynamic, and then you have this plainclothes police officer who dreams of being a detective named Bert Kling. And Kling is interested in getting off the kind of the beat, even though he enjoys walking around and talking to his usual suspects in his route. But he is approached by an old friend that he hasn't seen in decades, and they have a young daughter who is kind of acting out, and they want him to come talk to it. It's really awkward because he hasn't seen this person forever, and like, why do you want me to talk to your sister's or your wife's sister? Why do you want me to talk to? It seems really awkward. He goes and does so, and then the next thing you know, they are asking him for another favor, and he gets wrapped up into investigating what's going on with this girl. And yeah, that brings him kind of indirectly into the Mugger's kind of investigation. And it turns into kind of this multi-threaded plot, which is really interesting, but it comes together as one big one at the end, and it's really well done. What I enjoyed about this, you have some detectives. That's the beauty of the 87th Precinct. You don't always get the same detectives, but you get mentions, which I really enjoy those little Easter eggs. But you get to see through the point of views of multiple different detectives in the 87th Precinct. We saw a lot of Hal Willis in this one, very hardworking, supportive colleague. You have Detective Lieutenant Burns, He's the kind of the squad commander, definitely very competent. You have the actual mugger, Clifford. I thought that was interesting to get his points of views as he's terrorizing the city and the women. There's definitely some vulnerability of the women in the city. I really liked Bert Kling, this plainclothes police officer, as he kind of gets involved without really knowing it, but he's more than just, a greenhorn kind of cop, and it was really well done. I enjoyed the climax. I enjoyed McBain's writing. It is punchy, quick. It doesn't waste words. I really enjoyed it. I really liked how the climax comes together, and I liked what he has done with it, and it definitely is interesting. Lo and behold, Bert Kling, this police officer in the 87th precinct, he becomes a fan favorite in the series, which I thought was interesting. I read that online. And so in terms of rating and overall, I give it a 4.3. I've really enjoyed McBain's prose. His prose is excellent. Probably some of the best prose writing that I'm looking for in this kind of subgenre of any other. I like it a little better than McDonald. I like it a little better than Ross McDonald. I like it better than Spillane, to be honest with you, and Max Allan Collins. I think McBain is probably top tier when I'm thinking of those characters. I do have to branch out into some others. I know a lot of people have talked about Rex Stout. People have talked about Robert Stark, which I've read. I've read a few of those as well. I think McBain's probably the best I've read, in my personal opinion. So, yeah, I'm really enamored by the series. I definitely am going to read more. So if you enjoy this type of writing, these two books are definitely up your alley. I think the 87th Precinct is by far my favorite. I give it a 4.3 this entry, which is really, really well. You can read these out of order. That is something I learned from Ollie at Criminale, and I have been kind of doing so. I've jumped around. I did jump back and grab this as book number 2. But yeah, that's my review of The Mugger from Ed McBain. I give it a 4.3 out of 5. And those are my book reviews. Little double feature for you. I did it all in one take, Mom. Look at me. Yeah. I probably just screwed it up saying that because that sounded really dumb. But anyways, I hope you're having a great day, and I will talk to you all in the next one. Thanks.